Hello, welcome to the BostonHMIS Project Descriptor Data Element Definition Training for the 2017 HMIS data standards that went into effect on October 1st, 2017. These data standards are the current standards that all homeless programs in Boston are required to collect. My name is Jennifer Flynn. I am the HMIS Administrator for the Boston Continuum of Care at the City of Boston's Department of Neighborhood Development. This training is not meant to be a step-by-step how to collect data in your HMIS system. This training is just to provide you with the data elements that are required to be collected, what each of those data elements actually means in HUD's eyes or your federal partner's eyes, and some special considerations around either project setup or how you collect and ask some data. Data elements are elements that contain the basic information about your projects that operate in the COC. They're also the building blocks of your HMIS. It allows your HMIS front-end software system to associate the clients that you're serving to projects across your agencies and across the city. It defines if a project is a residential program and delivers housing or just services. It also identifies the funding sources for your projects, whether they be HUD funded or other federally funded partners, or even just local privately funded programs. This is important as other funding sources or have certain data requirements that some other funding sources may not. Project descriptor data elements also track unit and bed inventory, which is very relevant and important for our annual homeless assessment report, our point in time count housing inventory chart, and basically any other reports that the City of Boston runs, either locally for data quality or bed utilization or just for policy and planning. Also, in some cases, these project descriptor data elements really tells your software system how you have to run your reports. This is especially true in emergency shelters that use a bed register versus an entry-exit setup with just using program start date and program end date. Here is the following list of the required data elements for project descriptors. Again, project descriptor data elements are typically set up by your HMIS system administrators as they are creating new programs in your system or may have to update current projects in your agency. Identifier is fairly simple. It is the legal name of your agency, and then your system will generate an ID that will be associated to all programs in your agency across the board. I should also probably mention at this point that I will flip through project and program and use it pretty much the same way, and it will just depend on how much I catch myself or not. Typically in common language, things are programs. However, HUD has changed the name of this data element to projects in the most recent data standard updates. Identifiers, again, it's the project name and a system created project ID. Some special considerations when you're naming your project. HMIS system administrators do not necessarily know the HUD or federally funded program name that you were granted. And typically a program has a different street name or a common name that is used. So please be mindful when you're naming your projects that to be as specific as possible so that others who may need to run system-wide reports or do some technical assistance into your program can easily find what's going on. Your operating start date should be just that. Again, the first day that this program was allowed or up and running to serve clients, whether it be in a housing setting or in a service setting. If your project was in operation before October 1st, 2012, then that start date may be estimated. Operating end date. My recommendation would be to leave this blank, and HUD basically does as well. The only time I would suggest that you enter an operating end date is when a program truly closes and you know this, you can go back in and update this. Or if you know that this is a specific 1-year pilot program and it has a definite end date and this program will not continue operating. Continuum of care code is especially important for agencies and projects which operate across multiple COCs. This code tells your HMIS system whether or not a program or project should be included in a data pool for the COC that is running it. Boston COC code is MA-500. It is very important that you enter this data exactly as is. Most HMIS front-end systems are looking for this 6-digit code. Some special considerations for programs that do operate in multiple COCs. In particular, a good example is the VA SSVF program, as a project may be operating in both or funded to serve clients in both a balance of state continuum of care and a rural or an urban continuum of care, because the VA doesn't necessarily fund programs by COCs. It's more VA medical areas. If a program serves multiple COCs, my recommendation and most recommendations would be to set those projects up as separate programs in your HMIS system. In the VA SSVF option, that would mean there would be 2 projects in HMIS. One would be a VA SSVF balance of state, and one would be a VA SSVF Boston for an example. The COC code in the SSVF Boston program would be MAS 500, and the balance of state program would be whatever the balance of state COC code is. HUD does publish a list of these COC codes, so they are available if you do have projects in other continuums of care. Project type. The rationale for project type is to identify a program if it's a COC project or not. This is a little funky of a question. You'll see in a minute. Is this a continuum of care project? All programs that are operating in the city of Boston and in HMIS should answer yes, that this is a continuum project, regardless of funding source. Basically, what this question just means is that yes, this program, again, operates within the boundaries, and we want this data to be reported. Project type also associates projects to a specific lodging type, or if it's services provided. It is necessary to identify your data collection requirements because different project types may have different questions that are asked throughout the course of a client's enrollment. Also used to identify if this is just a services project or if this is a residential project. And if it is a services project, is it associated with a residential project? That is especially important in rapid rehousing and SSVF programs, as Boston has made the decision to split these programs up into 2 phases. A pre-placement program for the clients that are still literally homeless, residing in a street outreach program or an emergency shelter, but are participating in rapid rehousing through housing search, and then a stabilization rapid rehousing program, which would be set up as a residential program for those that have gone through the housing search process and actually moved in and leased up with rapid rehousing resources. We'll get into a little bit more of that later on. I know I just kind of yammered on. Each federal partner also may have specific additional questions that are asked of project types. We are going to focus this presentation today on the HUD requirements, which you may also see named the common data elements. This gets more in depth in the program-specific data element training, and if you are somebody who needs to take that training, you'll understand what I mean as we move through this. The other federal partners that participate in HMIS other than HUD programs are the HOPL program, the Department of Health and Human Services PATH program, Runaway and Homeless Youth, and the Veterans Administration. So again, project type, the number 1, continuum project. Again, this just says that yes, this project is operating within the geographic boundary of the city of Boston, and that this data on clients that we've served should be included in data polls for reporting. The next is the actual project type, and this is, again, is this a residential program, which type of a residential program, and if it's a services-only program or not. I don't want to get into too much information here about the types of projects. As you can see, homeless prevention, a street outreach program, emergency day shelter, transitional housing, safe haven, rapid rehousing. Some special considerations here on the safe haven project type. In Boston, only a VA-funded safe haven should be classified as a safe haven project type. If you are a DMH-funded safe haven, you should be classified as a PH permanent supportive housing program. This is really due to the program design and policies that were put in place with Boston and DMH many moons ago that allow somebody to maintain their chronic status or homeless status if they are eligible and decide to move in a different type of permanent housing program, which is more appropriate than a safe haven. VA safe havens operate truly like the definition here in the HMIS data standards of being a project that, you know, offers services to hard to reach homeless, mentally ill people, presents 24 hours of residence and services and very small capacity and low demand on services and referrals. Also, some special considerations, as I mentioned earlier, rapid rehousing programs must be set up as two distinct programs in HMIS. Should be a rapid rehousing pre-placement program that is designated a services only program and affiliated with the second rapid rehousing stabilization program that is set up as a PH rapid rehousing. Again, this is due to the warehouse and automatic reporting and automatic report generation, and allows a client to, in the data world, still be active in the emergency shelter while receiving the housing search services that are part of the rapid rehousing program. Some more project types here. Permanent supportive housing with a disability. This is your typical, what you think of as your formerly Shelter Plus Care and SHP leasing programs, which are now the COC leasing and rental assistance programs. A permanent housing program that has some services that does not have a disability required. PH housing only is typically what you may think of as just a BHA unit. You know, they get an apartment, but there's no support services attached to it through either the unit or that you're delivering them yourselves. There is only one coordinated assessment program, and that's like HMIS, COC operational program that is managed by the Department of Neighborhood Development. Some information here again on a services only program. There are many services only programs out there in the homeless world that do fantastic work in both, you know, childcare programs, employment assistance, some education programs, strictly housing search programs, etc. If you are one of these types of programs, you are a services only program and you're not affiliated with a residential program. Services only programs that may be part of a residential program are, as we said before, the rapid rehousing programs, those pre-placement programs. And there may also be, if you're an agency that is a former Shelter Plus Care provider, you're a COC rental assistance provider now. The leasing part of the COC rental assistance is handled by one agency, but the support services are delivered by a second tri-party agreement agency. That agency may elect to also capture HMIS data on the clients that they're serving in the Shelter Plus Care program, just for their own reporting purposes. If that is the case, then you may also be a services only program that is affiliated with a permanent housing program. Other program types. I don't believe we'd have too many of them. HUD does a really good job of splitting things out. But if your project does not fit into one of these set project types, feel free to select other and describe your program type. So again, just some information here on if you're affiliated with the residential project or not. And you should also, hopefully that project is within your agency as well, and to capture the ID information of that residential program as well, so that they can be hooked up together. Method for tracking emergency shelter utilization. This really mostly only comes into play for emergency shelters, or again, because it's emergency shelter utilization, but this means Are these large mass shelters that are using a bed register to capture daily bed nights on a client with an open enrollment? Or is this truly a program where once you enroll, you are kind of required to stay there every night, and when you don't come for that night, you're going to be exited out of the program? Some important note is that night by night, or what we call bed register programs, are required to exit a client out of their project if they have not shown up for a bed night in 30 days. This is typical, in practice at the shelters, typically happens every couple weeks or so that administrators will run a report and clean this data up. Clients should be exited as of that last bed night that they were here at your shelter. Federal partner funding sources, again, decent list here. This should match up with your grant agreement for your projects that you're setting up in HMIS. Boston requires or strongly encourages that even if your program is not a federally funded project that has to report into HMIS, that you do also report your data into HMIS. It helps for policy and planning purposes and really enables us to have a full picture of the homeless situation in the city of Boston. If your project is not federally funded, we do ask that you still select the HUD, either COC or ESG source for the appropriate component for your program. This will allow you to capture the same data elements in the same consistent manner across the board. Again, continuing on the list here. Your grant identifier, this helps with generating your APRs if you're required to. If you have uploads that have to go to your federal partner agencies, like the VA must report to, or VA-funded programs must report their data into the VA repository. RI programs must upload their data to RI. The grant identifier and the grant start and end date should match your grant documents for that reporting period that you're reporting on. Bed and unit inventory. Again, this is the building blocks of our housing inventory chart in the city of Boston. Is important for utilization rates, capacity information, and if you're a permanent housing project, then knowing where vacancies are. Again, they should be collected at project setup. However, we do ask for regular reviews, especially with emergency shelter programs, if beds are changing on a regular basis or needed to add a significant number of beds. So some special considerations: all residential projects in HMIS must have a bed and unit inventory record as of October 1st, 2017, and finalized and accurately entered into the HMIS by January of 2018 for the 2018 Housing Inventory Chart update. Boston census is scheduled for January 31st. It is the last Wednesday of the month. This is straight from the HUD HMIS data manual and is a fairly, I don't want to say new requirement because it has been really required for many, many years, but this is the first time they've put such strong language on when it has to be done for all projects. Projects of more than one household type must have a separate inventory record for each type. This typically happens in more of DV shelters and where they may serve a single individual and a household with children. So maybe, a single female on one side and then a single mom with two kids on another. Those would have to have two separate inventory records for each of those household types. Also, if you are a shelter that changes your availability throughout the course of the year, typically these are the emergency shelters where you add seasonal beds, that get brought online in the wintertime, or if you have regular overflow beds that are there. Each of those bed types must have their own inventory record as well. If your project operates in more than one COC, then you definitely need to have separate inventory records for each of those COCs and be sure that you are associating those with the correct COC code at the time. A project may have multiple historical inventory records. However, special attention must be paid to the information date and the inventory start and end dates to be sure that when data is run and reports are run, that the correct and current inventory is being reflected. Please see page 22 of the 2017 HMIS Data Standards Manual for more information on this piece. Inventory date, again, is the date that those beds became available for lease up. This date for some projects may be very far in the past. Your inventory end date, again, you can leave it blank. If you know that it's going to be closed out for a certain reason, then you may enter an end date. And again, COC code is very important, especially for projects that operate in multiple COCs. Household type, again, are you serving households without children, which we typically will refer to on the common language as single adults. Households with at least one adult and one child, which again, common language is typically, we refer to them as families. And then households with only children, these would be, our common language would be juvenile parents. So these are moms or dads that are under the age of 18 years old and also have children with them. Bed inventory is, again, just that. It is the number of beds that is available tonight for homeless persons, not the number of persons who were in those beds on that night. This is typically what your grant agreements say your capacity is, right? It's how many people can you have in this program tonight. So unit inventory. Unit inventory can sometimes be a little confusing. For programs that serve single adults, your typical large-scale emergency shelters, your bed inventory and your unit inventory should match. Where unit inventory and bed inventory don't is more typically on the family side of things. Think about it as you have a building with 5 rooms, and in each of those rooms, there are now 3 beds. So your unit inventory would be 5 for those 5 rooms, but your bed inventory would be 15. So it would be those 3 beds in each of those 5 rooms. Bed types, again, for emergency shelters only. Are these beds facility-based, meaning that they're here on site at your agency? Are they voucher beds, which are typically hotel motel vouchers, or are they other beds, which may end up being an overflow that you had to set up somewhere, off-site location? Availability, are these beds available all year? You always have these beds open. Are these seasonal beds, meaning that they get brought on during a specific time frame? Again, typically we bring on our seasonal beds sometime in October or November through March or April for the winter time. And then overflow beds are these, mats that you put on the floor of the lobby or cots that you set up in a separate room that aren't typically always available. Dedicated bed inventory. This is this is a slice of your overall bed inventory. Dedicated beds are beds that only this population can go into these beds out of our overall program. So the types of dedicated beds are veterans only beds, youth only beds, or chronically homeless only beds. So again, these are a subset of your overall bed inventory. You may have a 100-bed emergency shelter. Of those 100 beds, 10 of them are set aside for a veteran, 5 of them set aside for a homeless youth, and 20 of them are set aside for your chronically homeless. So what did I just add that up to? 35. So 65 of your other beds are available for just, bad language here, but your plain vanilla homeless person who's coming in for shelter that night. HMIS participating beds. If you're filling this out, then your beds are in HMIS. This bed number should equal, again, your overall bed inventory number. If you have, again, 100 beds, then you're really reporting on all of those beds every night. We do see programs that are set up in HMIS that do not have 100% HMIS bed coverage. However, we know that that is just a data quality issue. So please be sure to keep track of that. Some additional project information. Again, COC code is Mass 500. The geo code is a specific code that associates your project, geographically within the city of Boston. Boston's geo code is 250282. This is important and gets reported during the housing inventory chart phase. Your target populations. There are 2 separate target populations. And again, your program should only be marked as one of these target populations if 75% or more of the clients in that program are this population. So those would be domestic violence victims or persons with HIV/AIDS. Victim service providers should also be, again, those domestic violence victims. The project zip code, where exactly this program is located. Are you in an urban or a suburban or a rural setting? We're all urban. Housing type, is this just one building, one site, all of your beds are here? You single site based, but it's kind of clustered multiple sites, may mean it's more of a campus type setting. You've got a main office and there are 3 or 4 buildings maybe scattered around an open park or whatnot. And then tenant-based scattered site, and those are really that this is a program that's a mobile voucher, and the clients go out and find their own unit out in the main population. And then your plain address. The project street address should be, again, the kind of main office of where this project is located. So that's the end of the project descriptor, data elements, training. You can see here is the HUD landing page for all of HMIS information. Here is the data standards manual. You may contact me. Again, I'm Jennifer Flynn, the HMIS administrator, and also Kadra Adderley is the HMIS coordinator for the city of Boston. Thank you.